I feel my broken my heart because it's terrible. The life is changing in a second.
I don't think any amount of money can replace losing a wife and a mother, but we're just doing what we can.
This is Maria Florinda Rios Perez de Velasquez, a 32-year-old Guatemalan house cleaner and devoted mother of 4 children. On the morning of November 5th, 2025, in the quiet suburb of Whitestown, Indiana, Maria would be fatally shot in the head while standing on a stranger's porch trying to do nothing more than her job. Maria only showed up at the wrong address, but never lived to realize her mistake. But before we get to how a simple GPS error turned into a tragedy that would ignite national debates about gun laws, immigrant safety, and the very meaning of reasonable fear, let me take you back to where this story really begins.
Self-defense also imposes a duty to retreat before using force. When we're talking about stand your ground statutes, is that some states have legislation that removes the duty to retreat in all circumstances.
Maria Florinda Rios Perez de Velasquez was born in Cabracon, Guatemala, a small rural town nestled in the Western Highlands, home to a predominantly Mam indigenous Mayan community. Like so many others from her homeland, Maria made the difficult decision around 2022 to immigrate to the United States, bringing 2 of her daughters with her. She was seeking what so many immigrants seek: safety, opportunity, and a chance to build a better future for her children. Maria settled in Indiana, where her father and 5 siblings had already established lives, providing her with a vital support network in an unfamiliar country. In Indiana, Maria found work as a house cleaner. For approximately 7 months, she and her husband, Mauricio Velasquez, worked together for A&A Quality Cleaning, taking on early morning assignments that required them to arrive at homes before sunrise, keys in hand, ready to clean model homes and residential properties. It was honest work, the kind that 62.7% of Latina immigrants do across the United States. Maria was described by those who knew her as beautiful, hardworking, and deeply devoted to her family. Her family called her a beacon, someone who brought light into their lives and fought fiercely for the well-being of her 4 children. Now, let's talk about the perpetrator at the center of this story, Kurt Douglas Anderson. At 62 years old, Anderson was a retired psychiatric registered nurse who had served in the U.S. Navy Reserve as a Nurse Corps officer for 26 years, from October 1, 1981 to July 31, 2007. He lived with his wife, Yoshi, in a home on Mays Lane in Whitestown's Heritage subdivision, a residence they had occupied for approximately 4 years. But here's where things get interesting. A former neighbor described Anderson and his wife as reclusive, noting that the couple didn't go outside much and seemed very paranoid about the world. They avoided social interactions and even maintained a designated safe room in their home for potential emergencies. This wasn't just a casual concern about security, because Anderson had called police twice before the shooting, once in 2023 and once in 2024, to report suspicious activity near his home. In both instances, officers responded but found no evidence of any criminal activity whatsoever. In September of 2025, just 2 months before the shooting, Anderson purchased a black Glock 48 9mm semi-automatic handgun specifically for home protection. He had traded in his first firearm, which he'd bought in 2023, for this new weapon. Despite his Navy service, where he had received only basic firearms training and earned a pistol sharpshooter badge, Anderson had no advanced weapons training. To prepare himself for potential home invasions, he watched online videos about how to respond to intrusion scenarios. Critically, according to court documents, he had never fired the Glock before November 5th. So you have Maria, a hardworking mother simply trying to provide for her family, and you have Anderson, a man described as paranoid, armed with a weapon he'd never fired, living in a state that has some of the strongest self-defense protections in the country. The stage was set for disaster, and on that November morning, disaster was exactly what arrived at Anderson's front door. The morning of November 5th, 2025 started like any other workday for Maria and her husband, Mauricio. Their employer had provided them with keys and a Google Maps link the night before, directing them to what they believed was a model home in Whitestown's windswept farm subdivision that needed cleaning. They followed the GPS directions exactly as given, arriving at the address around 6:50 in the morning, roughly 30 minutes before sunrise when it was still dark outside. But here's the problem. The GPS had made an error. Instead of directing them to the intended property in windswept farms, it brought them to a home on Maze Lane in the neighboring Heritage subdivision, a residence they had occupied for approximately 4 years. Maria and Mauricio approached the front door and began trying the keys they'd been given. According to Mauricio's statement to the police, they spent approximately 30 to 1 minute attempting to unlock the door. They weren't banging, kicking, or trying to force entry. The couple was simply, quietly, trying different keys in the lock, the way any house cleaner would when arriving at what they believed was their assigned worksite. Inside the home, Kurt Anderson and his wife were asleep upstairs in their bedroom. Anderson was awakened by what he described as a commotion at the front door, the sound of keys or tools in the lock. He looked through a window and saw 2 people at his door, and in his mind he perceived them as aggressively thrusting at the door, trying to break in. He told police he felt terrified. What happened next is where this story takes its darkest turn. Anderson didn't call out to ask who was there or yell a warning. He didn't call 911 first and wait for police to respond. Instead, he retrieved his Glock handgun from a lockbox in their designated safe room, loaded it for the first time ever, walked to the top of his stairs, and from behind his closed, locked front door, fired a single shot through the door without any verbal warning whatsoever. The bullet struck Maria Florinda Rios Perez de Velasquez in the head. Mauricio held his wife as she died on the porch of a stranger's home, her blood covering him, her life slipping away in seconds. He heard no voices, no warnings from inside the house before the shot was fired. From the moment Maria and Mauricio arrived at the door to the moment Anderson fired his weapon, less than 2 minutes elapsed. 2 minutes was all it took for a GPS error to become a fatal shooting. Inside the home, Anderson heard weeping outside his door. He told his wife to call 911, reporting what he believed was a home invasion attempt. When Whitestown Metropolitan Police Department officers arrived at the scene, they found Maria Florinda Rios Perez de Velasquez deceased on the porch with a single gunshot wound to her head, confirmed by the Bone County Coroner's Office. The officers found a spent casing on the stairs inside where Anderson had stood when he fired, and a bullet hole piercing the front door. And here's what they didn't find: any signs of forced entry whatsoever. No damage to the door or the frame. The door was locked and intact. Every piece of physical evidence contradicted any notion that Maria and Mauricio had been trying to break into the home. When police initially tried to get Anderson to exit his home, he refused their commands, only complying when allowed to leave through the back door. Both he and his wife were detained for questioning. Later, that same day, during a police reenactment at his home, where investigators walked through the sequence of events, something shifted in Anderson. When he learned the true identities of the people at his door, when he discovered that he hadn't stopped a home invasion, but had instead killed a house cleaner who was simply at the wrong address, he became visibly upset.
And now to this developing tonight. We are now hearing from the family of a cleaning worker who was shot and killed outside a home in Whitestown yesterday.
They shared their story with Ella Rhodes.
The family of Maria Florinda Rios Perez is heartbroken and mourning the loss of their mom and wife. The family made it clear they want justice. On Monday morning, Whitestown police came to this home after they received a call for a possible home invasion. Police say they found Perez on the front porch of the home. Police say they later found out the woman never entered the home. They say Perez worked with the cleaning crew and went to the wrong address. Her husband, Mauricio Velasquez, says she was 32 years old. She leaves behind her husband and 4 children, as well as her family in Guatemala. She has only been in the U.S. for 2 years. Her husband describes her as hardworking, a wonderful mother, and life partner. The girls are also devastated. It is not easy to lose a mother. They know their mom is with God and won't come back. She left in the morning and never returned. They will never see her again. Whitestown police say this is an ongoing, active investigation. They plan to give us an update on the investigation sometime next week. In Indianapolis, Ella Rhodes, 13 News.
And tragic story there. A friend of the family tells 13 News community members are meeting tomorrow to discuss how to help the family.
According to the probable cause affidavit, he placed his head on the table and stated, "I didn't mean for anything to happen to anybody." But it was too late because Maria was gone. In the days following the shooting, while Maria's family grieved and her body lay in the morgue, Boone County prosecutor Kent Eastwood and his team began a comprehensive review of the evidence. They examined witness statements, crime scene videos, diagrams, and the physical evidence from the scene. The team also reviewed Indiana's self-defense laws, particularly the state's Stand Your Ground statute and Castle Doctrine provisions. On November 17, 2025, 12 days after the shooting, Prosecutor Eastwood held a press conference to announce his decision. Kurt Anderson was charged with voluntary manslaughter, a Level 2 felony under Indiana law. The charge carries a potential sentence of 10 to 30 years in prison and a fine of up to $10,000. But here's what makes this case particularly significant. It's part of a disturbing national pattern that has plagued American communities for decades.
And breaking now at 4, a homeowner charged. That is the major decision announced today by the Boone County prosecutor in the death of a woman in Whitestown who went to the wrong address as part of her job cleaning houses.
This is a major story that you at home have had a lot of interest in. Right now, that homeowner, Kurt Anderson, is in the Boone County Jail facing a charge of voluntary manslaughter. Jenny Runovich is in Boone County where she's been combing through these court docs. And Jenny, those reveal key details behind this decision. What have you learned?
Yeah, they really do, Felicia. We had 25 pages in this probable cause document. And really what's most striking and maybe what goes to the heart of the prosecutor's decision today is how it talks about Anderson grabbing for a quickly and then making that decision to fire through a front door that was both locked and deadbolted. Now, according to the probable cause, Anderson also admitted to police he never announced himself or tried to even talk to the people on the other side of the door before firing that. Immediately afraid, assuming a break-in, according to court documents, grabbing his gun and that's why the prosecutor says after reviewing the evidence, the Stand Your Ground law just doesn't fit Anderson's actions that day. Court documents describe how Maria Florinda Rios Perez and her husband went to the address they were given by their boss to clean a home. Well, it turned out to be the wrong address. They tried the keys in the door around 7 a.m. and that noise is what woke up Anderson and his wife inside. He told investigators he's a night owl, heard a commotion, grabbed his glasses and went to the stairs where he saw two people through the window and thought it's a break-in. The probable cause saying he then grabbed his Glock and loaded it. He also told police he'd been a gun owner since 2023, but he'd never fired his own gun, even at a range. Hadn't fired a gun at all since he worked for the Navy as a psychiatric nurse. Anderson and his wife told police he was terrified, in a state of panic. Court docs say it was only a little over a minute between the time he heard the noise to firing that deadly shot into the door. The next thing he heard was crying from Maria's husband on the porch.
What we're saying is that the Stand Your Ground law does not apply in this case, as Mr. Anderson did not have proper information which would allow him to make the determination that he was reasonable in his actions.
And to come to that conclusion, the prosecutor saying they went through interviews, videos, and a lot of evidence with police. It took about a week to comb through all that information and get this document leading to that voluntary manslaughter charge. Kurt Anderson is now in the Boone County Jail. He's being held on no bond for now until his initial hearing. That's when the judge will determine a bond. That hearing set for Friday. But Dustin and Felicia, the prosecutor, also calling this an extremely rare case, especially here in Boone County, and he expressed sympathy for the family involved here too.
Yeah, so tragic all the way around.
All the way around. Yeah. Jenny Runovich, thank you.
Maria's story isn't unique, as it is tragically familiar. In fact, wrong place shootings have been occurring across the United States with alarming frequency, particularly in states with expansive stand-your-ground laws. These laws, enacted in over 30 states, permit deadly force without a duty to retreat if a reasonable threat is perceived. But the critical question remains, what constitutes reasonable? Let me take you through some cases that eerily mirror what happened to Nuria. In April 2023, in Kansas City, Missouri, 16-year-old Ralph Yarl, a black honor student, rang the wrong doorbell while trying to pick up his siblings. Homeowner Andrew Lester, 84 years old, shot him in the head and arm without warning. Yarl survived with lasting injuries. Lester claimed he felt terror upon seeing a black male at his door. He eventually pleaded guilty to second-degree assault in 2025, but died shortly after.
Well, the Missouri man accused of 16-year-old Ralph Yarl has now been charged with first-degree felony assault and armed criminal action. Andrew Lester told police that he thought Yarl was trying to break into his home, so he shot him. Yarl's family says the teen went to his door by mistake, and now court documents say there's no indication that any words were even exchanged before Lester opened fire. ABC News contributor and host at Law and Crime Network, Brian Buckmeyer, joining me now for more. So, Andrew Lester, Brian, as we know, the man accused here, he's been charged with felony assault, but Ralph Yarl's family had hoped for attempted charges. They want him charged to the fullest extent of the law. What do you make of this, the prosecutor's charges, and also the talk about racism here, and looking at his mugshot and wondering, is there something else going on in this 85-year-old man that we just simply don't know yet?
Yeah, so Kara, the first thing is, I thought the same thing. Why is there not an attempted charge here when you're talking about one to the head and then a second one to the arm? And then I looked at the actual statute that Missouri has for assault in the first degree, and it actually encompasses attempted. It's not just a very serious injury to an individual, but also the attempted where serious physical injury occurs. That's what gets you this type of first-degree assault, where someone could go to jail for 10 to 30 years, or the maximum being that of life in prison. To the second point about race, I understand a lot of people asking for it to be hate crimes, that this might be racially motivated, but I think that there's a maybe more nuanced issue here at play, that I don't see the elements of a hate crime charge here, but there could be a racial aspect to this, in the sense that him perceiving what he believed to be a very large black man, and that's not the situation, this is a boy. You look at his face there, I don't think a razor has touched his face in his life. That's a boy. But what he perceives based on the color of his skin and the size of his body is that of a threat. And that's why he reacted to it as such. I don't think it's racist, but I think it is racial.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong here, but as a gun owner, there has to be, doesn't there legally have to be some sort of warning, as in, you know, who are you? Stand back. I'm armed. Doesn't there have to be some type of communication before you open fire?
Not necessarily. When it comes to self-defense, which is being applied here, the rule that most people use is you don't have to wait to be punched before you punch. Of course, we're talking about a here. The fact that there were no words communicated makes it more difficult for Lester to accuse y'all of anything, breaking and entering, assaulting him. And that's why a lot of people say that there should be words communicated, because it makes it much clearer if you're attempting self-defense, but there's no hard and fast rule that needs to occur.
Are there questions, though, that need to be answered with regard to an 85-year-old man's, you know, mental capacity? We don't know anything about him yet, right? Do we know if he's suffering from any type of mental illness or dementia? Or I'm just throwing this out there. There's more to be known about him, right? And also, was he a legal gun owner?
Yeah, so the first one is absolutely, because when we talk about self-defense, or this is, I think, more accurately called the Castle Doctrine, because he would be saying he's protecting himself and his home, it goes to a question of reasonableness, and it's reasonableness based on the person. It's different to be a reasonable 84-year-old man in Missouri as it would be different to be a 35-year-old man in New York. And so if we're looking at his reasonableness, we do have to explore his mental health, his perception of what's going on, the fact that it's 10 o'clock at night. And that will all come into play as we learn more and more about him if this does actually progress to a trial. When we talk about then other aspects circulating this case, it is going to be a wait and see, but we do have those questions as you're positing.
Missouri's Stand Your Ground law was invoked in his defense, and experts note such laws increase justifiable homicides by 10 to 20% in states that adopt them. That same month in Hebron, New York, 20-year-old Kaylin Gillis was fatally shot when her group's car accidentally turned into the wrong rural driveway. Homeowner Kevin Monahan fired from his porch, claiming he feared they were there to harm him. He was convicted of second-degree murder in 2024. This was because New York doesn't have a Stand Your Ground law requiring retreat if safe, and the jury found his actions completely unreasonable given the circumstances. Also in April 2023 in Elgin, Texas, two teen cheerleaders, Peyton Washington and Heather Roth, mistakenly opened the wrong car door in a parking lot after practice. The occupant, Pedro Tello Rodriguez Jr., shot at them as they fled, injuring both. He was charged with deadly conduct, raising questions about proportional response even under Texas's Castle Doctrine, which extends to vehicles. But here's where it gets really troubling. Not all of these cases result in charges. In August 2023 in Columbia, South Carolina, a 20-year-old college student, Nicholas Donofrio, while intoxicated, banged on and broke a window at the wrong house. The homeowner shot him through the door, and no charges were filed under South Carolina's Stand Your Ground law. Authorities deemed the homeowner's fear reasonable given the circumstances. Sound familiar? These patterns go back even further. In 1992 in Louisiana, 16-year-old Japanese exchange student Yoshihiro Hattori approached the wrong house while in costume for a Halloween party. The homeowner shot him with a .44 Magnum and was acquitted on self-defense grounds, with the jury citing fear despite no intrusion. In 2013 in Michigan, 19-year-old Renisha McBride knocked on a door seeking help after a car crash. Homeowner Theodore Wafer shot her through a screen door. He was convicted of second-degree murder because evidence showed no imminent danger. What connects all these cases? Quick escalations from minor errors, heightened fears, the presence of firearms, and debates over what's reasonable. Studies have linked Stand Your Ground laws to 10 to 30% increases in homicide rates, though causation remains debated. Critics, including organizations like the Giffords Law Center, argue these laws exacerbate racial disparities, with Black individuals becoming disproportionately victims, and encourage vigilante actions rather than de-escalation.
Stand Your Ground statutes are controversial, and more than half the country has one of those statutes in place. I spoke to experts about the laws and why researchers say they have different implications for people of color. In the span of 1 week, 3 with a similar story. Young people made a mistake. The cases bringing renewed focus to Stand Your Ground laws. Justice! What exactly are Stand Your Ground laws?
Stand Your Ground statutes really greatly expand your ability to use self-defense.
Cami Chavez is the director of the Center for Criminal Justice Policy and Reform at William & Mary College. She says most states provide some form of protection for self-defense, but at least 28 states and Puerto Rico have enacted Stand Your Ground or similar laws.
Self-defense also imposes a duty to retreat before using force. When we're talking about Stand Your Ground statutes, is that some states have legislation that removes the duty to retreat in all circumstances.
The laws have stirred controversy over the years. No justice! No peace! In 2012, the death of Trayvon Martin sparked conversations about Stand Your Ground in Florida, known to have among the strongest statutes in the country. Martin, a 17-year-old unarmed Black boy, was fatally shot by George Zimmerman, who later claimed self-defense and was acquitted following a criminal trial. Proponents of these laws, including the National Rifle Association and the Second Amendment Foundation, say they protect citizens when they're in danger.
The oldest human right is the right of self-preservation. You can stand your ground and initiate self-defense protocols however you deem necessary.
They essentially tell people that if you're in public and you feel threatened, You can use deadly force and take another human life, even if you could have retreated.
The Journal of the American Medical Association's 2022 study found stand your ground laws were associated with an 8 to 11% increase in monthly rates of homicide and firearm homicide. But studies show stand your ground outcomes are not the same for all people. In 2020, the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights releasing a report on stand your ground laws in Florida. The study found cases involving a white and black victims were 10 times more likely to be ruled as justified compared to a black and white victims. The study also found the number of homicides of black people deemed justifiable more than doubled in stand your ground states in the 6 years after the law was implemented. In the cases of the 3 young people shot last week, Chavez says, like the laws themselves, the potential outcomes are mixed.
Each case has different facts, and we're also dealing with different statutes.
And it is important to add there have been efforts to change or repeal stand your ground laws, but those statewide repeals have largely been limited.
Back in Indiana, Maria's attorney, Alex Lamontes, emphasized this very point. He noted that Maria was simply arriving to clean a home and was shot through a closed door, calling her death tragic and preventable. On November 21, 2025, Anderson appeared in court and was released on $25,000 bail with GPS monitoring. He pled not guilty. His trial is scheduled for March 30, 2026. His defense attorney continues to argue that Indiana's castle doctrine should protect him, that his real-time perception of threat is what matters, not hindsight.
Welcome back to 13 News at 4 on this Friday afternoon. One of the big stories we're following today, the man charged with a woman in Whitestown appeared in court.
So this was Kurt Anderson's first court appearance before a judge since Boone County prosecutors revealed the charges filed Monday.
This is a case that has captured national attention. Our Rich Nye covered that initial hearing and has the latest.
The man charged with shooting a cleaning worker on the porch of his Whitestown home was brought to the Boone County Courthouse Friday morning wearing a bulletproof vest. Kurt Anderson is charged with voluntary manslaughter. At his initial hearing, the judge set bail at $25,000 cash or $2,500 surety. That was half of what the prosecutor asked for. Anderson will be on GPS monitoring, but not home detention. On November 5th, about 7 a.m., Maria Florinda Rios Perez de la Vasquez showed up at the wrong address to clean a home. She was shot in the head through the door. She was 32 years old, a mother of 4 children. Anderson will return to the Boone County Courthouse for a hearing on January 23rd. His trial is tentatively set for March 30th of next year.
On November 23, 2025, Maria's body was repatriated to Guatemala. Her mother received her casket at Guatemala City's airport before transporting her to Cabricán for burial, where community members prepared altars and shared meals in accordance with Mom Indum traditions. The family's statement captures the heart of this tragedy. As experts from every town for gun safety point out, these laws, combined with permitless carry in 28 states, heighten risks particularly for minorities and workers like delivery drivers and house cleaners. However, no verdict will bring Maria back to her children. No trial will undo Mauricio's trauma. But this case, along with the dozens like it across the country, forces us to confront a fundamental question. At what point does self-defense become an excuse for shooting first and asking questions never?
The woman's family is in mourning and calling for justice. Our Brandon Schaff was at today's visitation and funeral where hundreds came to support them.
We're at the church where the community is coming together to mourn the loss of that cleaning crew worker who was tragically shot and killed after going to the wrong home in Whitestown.
At the funeral home, family, friends, and strangers paid their respects to Maria Florinda Rios Perez de Velasquez. Ana Gaspar, a fellow cleaning crew member in Whitestown for more than 10 years, came to offer comfort to her family.
I feel broken my heart because it's terrible. The life is changing in a second.
Gaspar says that she wants the person responsible for Maria's death to be held accountable. She wore a vest with the words, "I'm a house cleaner," written on the back. She says that it'll help people identify her and hopefully prevent a tragedy like the one that claimed Maria's life last Wednesday.
Every time I arrive at the house for do my job, need wear this for the neighbors know. I am a cleaning lady, no intruder.
Later, loved ones carried Maria's casket from the funeral procession into a church, her loved ones visibly upset, hundreds of others there to support them. Nicole Armento created a GoFundMe to help Maria's husband and 4 children, including an 11-month-old, after their loss. She says that it will also help pay for the funeral and transporting Maria's body home to Guatemala.
I don't think any amount of money can replace losing a wife and a mother, but we're just doing what we can.
I'm very grateful that her husband doesn't have to be trying to figure out how to feed his children in this time with all of this.
Representative Cash added that it was a moment for people to come together and offer support to the grieving family. Brandon Sheff, 13 News.
And tomorrow, there is a peaceful gathering and vigil planned at the Boone County Courthouse. The gathering starts at 9:30 Monday morning. The vigil is at 6 p.m. We plan to have crews at both of these. We'll keep you updated on air and online as this case in Whitestown unfolds throughout the week.
At what point do we value human life over unfettered gun rights? And how many more Marias, how many more Ralphs, how many more Kaylins before we demand that fear, even genuine fear, must be reasonable before it becomes fatal? Let me know what you think in the comments section. Also, click on one of the cards on your screen to see more tragic cases like this.